there. Well, the telomere units, actually what they do is cells divide. And when, if you remember from your biology classes, when cells divide, you have chromosomes. And let's just say that the hand is like chromosome. And so you have the chromosomes there. And when it's time to divide, the cells, the telomeres will come and they'll read the DNA, and they will build an identical set of chromosomes to it. And then the cells divide, and they split, and they still each have their own chromosomes that are identical to what the original was before they divided. And that's the way it works. So there's the potential there to divide in a stem cell, and stem cells are what really creates all of the cells in your body, to divide about 45 to 60 times in your lifetime. Well, that's important because when you're born, from conception to birth, you go from one cell to about 10 trillion. And when you're grown, you have about 100 trillion cells within your body. And every day, tens of millions of cells die off and they're replaced. And it's the role of telomeres to keep reading that DNA so that you can create a new chromosome, so the cell divides and all of the information, all the genetic structure is there, so you can continue on the way that you were. But over a period of time, those telomere units start wearing out and getting damaged, especially by oxidation. And we have about 2,200 new groups of free radicals that are in our environment that didn't really exist, and breathing in oxygen and things like that, of course, oxidizes sugars or fuels to create energy, so we have a lot of oxidation. And the older we get, the longer we live, the more oxidative damage is created, and they damage telomeres too. So from birth, where we have about 10,000 telomere units, scientists are theorizing, figured out that you'll lose them until you get down to about 5,000 telomere units. And at that point, serious things have already happened in your life, and you're getting very close to the end of it. And it's because you're running out of new cells to produce, and because the telomeres are just gone and they just can't duplicate fast enough, and the stem cells, instead of popping out cells all the time, are becoming sluggish. Now, a good way for you to understand this is like a beehive. A beehive will have 80 to 100,000 bees in it, and a bee only has a lifespan of about 6 to 8 weeks, honeybee. And so there's one queen in the beehive, and of course she's fed by all of the bees, and she just spits out eggs like crazy to replenish all of those bees that are dying every 6 to 8 weeks to keep the hive at a full size. But as the queen gets older, her telomeres start wearing out too, and it gets to the point where that hive, the number of bees in it, say it was 100,000, just like is a good comparison, because maybe we have 100 trillion cells in our body. So that 100,000, now not enough cells are coming out to replace the bees that are dying off, so the colony becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and pretty soon it can't sustain itself, and then the queen dies, and the hive will split. Sometimes it produces so many they go off and start a new one, but in the case where the queen deteriorates and then dies, then they'll create a new queen, and it starts popping out cells again. And with that hive, the numbers have gone way down. Say it was 100,000 bees, and maybe say they're down to 50,000, the queen's gone. They create a new queen, and that's like a stem cell, see? And so the new queen starts pumping out more and more eggs, and it becomes more and more bees and more and more and more, and the hive comes back to 100,000 bees, and it's a productive, healthy hive again. Well, the same principles are similar to what goes on in the human body. We have these stem cells, and they're just popping out cells right and left, but as we get older, they get slower, damaged, less telomere units that go on. And so here is the theory of reversing aging, of really a dramatic change that was never really conceived until just the last few years. In fact, they really didn't know until less than 10 years ago, I think, really what telomeres even did. They knew they were there, but they really didn't know what they did. And then they made some breakthroughs, and it actually came out of cancer research, because they were looking at telomeres on cancer cells, which they always have a high level of units because they're just supporting and reproducing new telomeres all of the time as they're going. And they thought, why is that? Why is a cancer cell immortal and other cells are dying off? And so a cancer cell just keeps growing and growing and growing, and the others are sluggish. And so pretty soon the cancer cells have crowded out the other cells, and organs fail and people die and things of that nature. So they took a look at it and they thought, well, what happens if we could increase telomere units within the human body? Could cells go on like cancer cells, and what would it do for cancer? The cancer cells that are there if they did. And so they found out that by supporting telomeres did nothing for cancer cells. Of course, they don't create cancer themselves, but as you supported telomere units, telomeres, you started building those units up, and if you could block with antioxidants the degradation that occurs to them, they're not going to deteriorate. And so you can support telomeres with certain types of nutrients, which scientists found. So actually, as your body becomes more healthy, then it's believed you'll have your immune system, all those systems that fight the things that come along in our life are built up. They're more viable. You feel more healthy, all of those. And so as that occurs, you're like the beehive. You're starting to produce more cells as you have more telomere units with it. And so that's the theory. And I keep saying theory because it's really new science. This is breakthrough science. In fact, it was only about 2 years ago on telomere science, some scientists received the Nobel Prize in medicine and health for their discoveries on what telomeres were and what they could do and their role in youth and aging and in health within the human body, supporting it. And so here we're talking about really 2-year-old technology on a major scale. And in the process, a few companies started to look at it to see, because they had some things they could inject to support telomeres, but they thought, how about nutritional components? And as they were examining it, they knew some things. For the first time, they knew that exercise would increase telomere units, but it's on a small scale. And a lot of people don't do that. But then they knew some other compounds would support telomere units. Melatonin is one, perhaps a lot of you are familiar with, and it does, but it's still on a smaller scale. And as they researched through ingredients, they found about 600 different ingredients found in nature that if a person take, it would support telomere units. But out of that, there were only a couple that were really extraordinary. In fact, there's 3. Resveratrol had a reasonably good effect on supporting telomeres. And of course, that ingredient is in our eternity. But we're really using it as a boost to support the sirtuin, the youthful regeneration in the body. And it has marvelous properties for that, and going in and supporting the body as it fine-tunes itself so you can create more energy and become more viable and healthy. But they found 2 types of herbs that had power, but you had to, like anything else, you had to extract the important ingredient and concentrate it greatly. Now, one of these came from India, and it was called Bacapa. And I'd used Bacapa for a long time in product I made, even with my previous company, 15 years ago. And I built it, or used it to build a product for the brain. And because Ayurvedic science from India showed it had spectacular results on the brain, especially for people that were getting older. And you saw things like memory improve and functionality within the brain. In fact, the brain has its own processes of maintaining or building itself, just like muscles do, or bones, or anything else like that. And this was like brain food. And you've heard that fish is brain food, of course, with omega-3 oils, but this was a super brain food, and the brain could do a lot with the nutritional value which it had. So I built a product based upon that. Little did I know, the key ingredient to it was one that could give massive support to telomeres. But then science come along and has researched it and found out that is the case. So we know what the ingredients are. They're called bacosides. You don't need to know all this, but bacosides and bacaposides coming from Baca. And we'll have literature. We have it right now that's being done, so you can see that if you want to know that. But those ingredients, when they're so concentrated,